Hi there. Alex O'Connor is an Oxford-educated philosopher and also an atheist YouTuber who likes to spread his knowledge about atheism on YouTube. And he tackles a number of different topics. And I just recently reviewed a debate that he did with Ben Shapiro, which I found pretty interesting. And I also found this video, this little nugget here, interesting as well. He says, "Is religion even about truth?" So I thought I'd do a review of that today. One of the things that he asserts is that we are just confused apes trying to make sense of a senseless planet. That leads to nihilism. And he rightly points out that atheism does lead to nihilism. Atheism is nihilistic, and it believes that we're utterly confused in a way that we're just lucky beneficiaries of cosmic chance. And so he looks at this person called Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a person from Somalia who was apparently, according to Alex, she would have been the fifth horse of new atheism. There are the four horses, and she would have been the fifth horse. But he says maybe providentially, it's nice that she did not become the fifth horse of new atheism because she has now said that she's a Christian. However, Alex questions the legitimacy of her claim because he felt that she didn't seek whether or not the Christian faith is a true belief. Instead, she points to the cultural benefits of Christianity because she says that the overcoming the China, Russia, and Iran governments is something very challenging, and it cannot just be done very easily. So she points that out. But she said that one of the ways that you can do that, instead of having to focus on power or authority or the rule of law or anything like that, she says one of the ways is to have a strong culture with strong internal, coherent, and shared beliefs. And she believes that the Christian faith is the best for that job. Now, the nice thing about the Christian faith is it is true. It is very true. And I have plenty of evidence, and I've made many videos on that, but we have plenty of evidence, both extra biblical and inside the Bible, of course, but we also have evidence outside of the Bible that's ancient. And there's lots of good reasons to believe that Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead and that he died for our sins and the sins of salvation. We have plenty of evidence in these times, in these countries all around the world, that Jesus has been making himself obvious to thousands of people across the planet. And you can go and find multiple testimonies of people, including from myself. But I digress. Let's listen to a little bit of Alex O'Connor here, and I'll have some commentary on whether or not I believe that Ayaan Hirsi Ali is on a good path, whether or not I think that the United Kingdom is having a resurgence in Christianity. Alex is from the United Kingdom, I believe, and whether or not Christianity is going to survive this modern new atheism. Alex pointed out Tom Holland's book, Dominion, and I've talked about his book quite a few times. But according to Alex, he believes that Tom Holland is part of the reason for a resurgence in interest in Christianity. Tom traced the history of Christianity and realized all of the good things that Christians have brought to the planet. Things such as the laws currently underscoring our governments in the West, and the idea of human dignity and human value and intrinsic human value, not conferred human value, meaning that we are born with intrinsic human value. We don't have to worry whether somebody else assigns us value. We're born with intrinsic human value, and we know that because we are made in the image of God, Genesis 1:27. So I want to say hi to Captive Desk and to Jesse Camping. I hope you guys are having a great day. I am kind of watching the screen here. So let's go ahead and listen to Alex, and we'll do a little bit of commentary.
It's difficult to tell if this is more of a win for the Christians or for the atheists. This is because, amongst a predictably electric series of reactions online, perhaps the most common objection to Ayaan's article has been its rather conspicuous lack of, well, arguments for the existence of God or the truth of Christianity. Instead, the essay is dedicated to culture. Western civilization is under threat, she writes. What unites us, she asks. How might we fill the nihilistic vacuum that atheism cultivates? Indeed, reading an essay in which Osama bin Laden, Richard Dawkins, and Vladimir Putin are all mentioned exactly as many times as Jesus Christ is, that is, once, tends to give the impression that this conversion story has less to do with what Christianity affirms and more to do with certain social threats that Ayaan has come to believe Christianity can negate. Now, just quickly, do you ever think about how you come to learn of these social debates and how you analyze the information contained in them? We live in a time of, shall we say, low trust in mainstream news, with bias and misinformation abounding.
So he's going to be promoting a source of news that he's providing here. So rather than get into that so much, let's just talk about some of what he said. What if Ayaan decided to come to Christianity through the door of its culture, what it's promoted in culture? So what are the Christian values? Well, truth, justice, sanctity of life. These are all also Jewish values, by the way. So this also speaks to Judeo-Christian values. But truth, fairness, equity, dignity of life. Dignity of life is huge. And the idea that we are all made in the image of God and that we're all given equal power, equal value. Okay, so it's made very clear in our founding fathers in the United States. We know these truths to be self-evident, that we're all made equal in the eyes of God, and that we're endowed with certain values, and we're endowed with certain rights. And among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's in the United States. Now, in the United Kingdom, the United Nations also has human rights values. And so that's pretty important to notice because that has also influenced much of the West. So in the West, we have this idea that people are entitled to certain rights. You don't see that in many communist countries. So it's not something that's all around the world. We assume it is. We have Ben Shapiro citing a book about weirdness. WEIRD is this acronym for Western educational, or Western educated, industrialized, and I'm forgetting the other two, Democrats, and I forget the R, but anyway, so he's talking about this particular book that's out there and how we assume that people all around the world share our values of human dignity and human rights and equal human rights, but they don't. If you go to China, obviously the person who's leading China right now believes that he has lots of rights. Xi Jinping, he believes that he has the rights and he's oftentimes taken away rights from other people. And you can see that in the way that he's locked up 1.8 million Uyghurs right now in concentration camp and nobody's doing much about it. Not even the Muslims. Uyghurs are Muslims, but I digress. Anyway, so we'll get into that. Let's just skip ahead a little bit here in his video so we can get past where he's doing his little self-promotion here. We'll get back to his comments on Ayaan. So here we go.
Trillions of dollars, or we're losing our lead in the technological race with China. Strange problems to be discussing in an essay that many would have expected to be at least a touch theological in focus. She continues, but we can't fight off these formidable forces unless we can answer the question, what is it that unites us? The response that God is dead seems insufficient. So, too, does the attempt to find solace in the rules-based liberal international order. The only credible answer, I believe, lies in our desire to uphold the legacy of the Judeo-Christian tradition. So, a thoroughly secular conversion? Perhaps not. Ayaan goes on to say, yet I would not be truthful if I attributed my embrace of Christianity solely to the realization that atheism is too weak and divisive a doctrine to fortify us against our menacing foes.
Amen. And we can also speak about the menacing foes in many of the countries happen to be atheists. And so China's leader is atheist. Putin, I don't know what Putin is. I would imagine, I think Putin might be an occultist. I also actually, surprisingly enough, think the Zelensky could be an occultist. I've heard that they have been doing some occult activities to try to gain some sort of power from the demonic in the world, which is terribly unfortunate, especially from Zelensky. I was rather distressed to find out that he appointed a witch to be serving in his government. But I digress again. But the point is that there are many people around the world who are menaces. And unless we have a unifying force that's intrinsically driven from within us, it's not something that's externally driven. Like she said, rules-based. It's not something that's focused on laws, things like that. It's something that can unify us together. And one of the things that can unify us together is this idea that we have an objective moral standard. There is an objective truth in God as our creator. How do we know we have a creator? I know that the atheist finds this explanation unsatisfactory, but I think you can look outside and look at the nature around us. I think you can look into the sky. God has made it very clear in the book of Romans that he has given adequate information to every single person on the planet, and everyone knows that God is true. Everyone knows that. That's just something that he says. He says that some people deny him, some people suppress his truth, and when they do that, he sends a powerful delusion. Now, unfortunately, when they do receive this delusion, they think that God doesn't exist, and they can look outside at the same nature that I look at, the same rainbows, the same stars, the same planets, the same beauty. They can look at the same thing and think that it just sort of fell into place, like flowers and all the beauty that we see outside, trees, daisies, dandelions, all this beauty just sort of accidentally cosmic splot fell into place and is actually needed on the planet for the planet's survival, and that people somehow with our 3.5 billion nucleotides all structured together as if written in a code, a computer code, they think all that just sort of fell into place. We don't have a coder. We don't have a creator. This is just blind luck. To me, this is utterly crazy, but it's the kind of craziness that you believe if you're an atheist. Wake up, atheists. There is a God, and God is very obvious. He came down and the word became flesh and dwelt among us about 2,000 years ago. He also made himself very clear in the Old Testament. Lots of miracles were performed, and those are all outlined in the Bible. And we saw that lots of miracles from Jesus, and even in the book of Acts from Jesus's disciples. And so some of the greatness that's come out of Christianity, the influence it has had on society to temper people from being selfish. It wants us to be selfless. It wants us to be sacrificial, sacrifice ourselves. The ultimate sacrifice that we can give in Christianity is to sacrifice ourselves for others. I heard a really great story about a banquet. And there was this story about people saying that God didn't exist, and they all found themselves sitting at a banquet. And God basically told them, let me give you an explanation of my existence and your purpose. And they noticed that they didn't have any elbows. And so they were unable to grab their own food. And so they're all sitting at the table in front of food, but they realize because they have no elbows that they can't feed themselves. But instead, they noticed that they could feed their neighbors. So they reached across the table with their arms that wouldn't bend and fed their neighbors food. That's sort of a nice little way to talk about our purposes here. We're here for the benefit of others. Jesus said to love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourselves. At the end of life, in 1 Peter 4:8, it says, love covers a multitude of sins. Above all else, love one another. Really important stuff, the value of love. And that is what Christianity is. That is the source of meaning and purpose. And so let's listen to more of what he says, because actually Ayaan Hirsi Ali is going to talk about the problem of atheism because it doesn't answer the question of our ultimate meaning and purpose. Here we go.
As if atheism is itself an identifiable doctrine, and even if it is, that it has somehow proved to be a more divisive one than, Christianity. But at least now she says she has another reason to be Christian, not just that of finding an effective way to combat our political foes. What is this reason? I have also turned to Christianity because I ultimately found life without any spiritual solace unendurable, indeed very nearly self-destructive. Atheism failed to answer a simple question. What is the meaning and purpose of life? This is perhaps a more familiar sentiment. Turning to religion as an escape hatch from nihilism is a common story, though I must say one which might help the atheist establish his case. Atheists must account for the existence and prevalence of religious belief, and one popular explanation is that religion is a social system invented to provide comfort to a planet of confused apes trying to make sense of the senseless and accidental fact of their own existence, and nothing more. This thesis is, of course, quite difficult to prove, but accounts of people converting to theism explicitly because life without it feels devoid of meaning hardly counts against it. Ayaan writes that atheism failed to answer what is the meaning and purpose of life, but it sounds more like she's decided that it did answer the question, just that it answered it with a resounding nothing.
Exactly. So we can go back to what Richard Dawkins says. Blind, pitiless indifference. He talks about that. But Richard Dawkins, famous atheist Richard Dawkins, even believes himself that religion has much value. Not every religion is equal, by the way. There's many different religions that have, they don't have the truth, I believe. They have elements of the truth. In fact, all 7 major world religions are unified in the fact that we all realize the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of them, even atheists, the American atheists, even that group. There was a study that showed that, Kinnear and colleagues, 2000. So anyway, so that's one of the things that's pretty cool about religion. It does unify us. Each of them have certain nuggets of meaning, nuggets of truth, but there is one that has the entire truth, and that's Christianity. And so if you want to know whether or not Jesus rose from the dead, you can look at the actions of his apostles and how Peter and the other apostles went into hiding while he was being crucified. Peter denied him 3 times. And then after Jesus rose and Peter and John ran to the empty tomb to discover it was empty, and then met up with Jesus over a period of 40 days in various places, in various ways, in front of themselves alone. Peter was alone one time when he encountered him, or sometimes we had encounters that were in groups. So the apostles encountered him. Paul reports that a group of 500 encountered him. And through this period of time and afterwards, miracles occurred. Miracles occurred during Jesus' ministry. And afterwards, in the book of Acts, we've got the apostles all able to perform miracles. And that includes the apostle Paul, who was once Saul, who was enlightened by Jesus on the road to Damascus. While he was heading to Damascus, ready to kill people who were following the way, he had his legal papers to be able to kill them, to round them up, men, women, and children, and throw them into the clink. All of a sudden, he saw a light and heard a voice, said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And Saul said, "Who am I persecuting, Lord?" He said, "Who am I speaking?" And he said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now go ahead." And so Saul was the one who ended up writing many books in the New Testament. In fact, more books than anyone else in the New Testament. And he went on preaching and ended up being beheaded under Nero in the 60s. Peter was crucified upside down. Peter's wife also was murdered just the week before Peter. We have many other apostles, unfortunately, went through some very gruesome endings. Why did they do it? They were in the unique position to know whether or not what Jesus did was actually true. They were uniquely qualified because they had actually seen Jesus. They had seen him come back to life. Doubting Thomas was doubting it, but he was able to put his fingers into Jesus's marks from his crucifixion. He came to believe in Jesus. Not everyone has the Saul experience, but you can see from the Saul experience the fruits. You will know them by their fruits. People were willing to risk their lives for what they knew to be the truth. And that is the truth of Christianity. That is the reason why Alex O'Connor needs to come to Christianity. Now, he did say some more in this about his thoughts on Christianity, and if he would grant some Christian cultural values. Like he would say, he realizes the importance of the Christian cultural values. A lot of these values are really good, and they came from Jesus. He came down to show us how he wants us to live. But he's not just a great moral teacher. One of the things that opened my eyes to Christianity was C.S. Lewis in his trilemma. So take a look at his trilemma. He said something like, he's not just a mere man. A man who said he was a man and did the sort of things that Jesus said. He forgave others. He did all of that stuff. Would not be just a great teacher. He would be a liar or a lunatic. Or he's the Lord. You have to make your mind up. Read that passage from C.S. Lewis. It opened my eyes. It opened other Christians' eyes. A lot of people have talked about it. It's from the book Mere Christianity. I was blessed with that reference to that book from a pastor on a plane once who sat next to me, and he showed me Isaiah 53. He said, "Who's this describing?" And I didn't know even what it was. I wasn't really terribly familiar with the Bible at the time. And he said, "Who's this describing? He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities." I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so obvious. That's Jesus. Is that actually in the Jewish scriptures? I got off the plane and checked. Yes, indeed. It's in the Jewish scriptures. Couldn't believe it. It made such an obvious reference to Jesus. And it was written around 800 years before Jesus walked the earth. And it was written about 400 years before the Persians came into power and started inventing the crucifixion as a means of killing someone and using it. Okay, you can also find references to hands and feet being pierced in Psalms 22, and you can find similar references in Zechariah 12:10. These give you some evidence of the truth of Christianity. So if Ayaan Hirsi Ali happens to watch videos and she knows the value of the culture of the Christian culture, but she doesn't know whether or not Christian beliefs are true, whether our founder, Jesus Christ, is truly our Lord and Savior, consider what I just mentioned. So here we go.
And, unable to accept this, she felt attracted to Christianity. But maybe not. Maybe we can find a plausible argument here for God's existence. We may simply accept as a premise that life must have meaning, perhaps evidenced in part by our very desire for meaning, and that since only something non-natural can give us this meaning, the supernatural must exist. C.S. Lewis famously wrote in Mere Christianity, "Most people, if they really had learned to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise." And later, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." This so-called argument from desire indicates the falsity of atheism in its failure to satisfy a desire that almost everybody has within them for something more, since it seems utterly mysterious why this desire should exist at all if that which we seek doesn't even exist. There's a lot to say about this argument, of course, but I won't go on here, mostly because I don't actually think that Ayaan was intending us to read such an argument into her words. Why? Well, immediately following this, Ayaan writes that where atheism promised of an age of reason and intelligent humanism, it actually left a void to be filled by a jumble of irrational and quasi-religious dogma involving modern cults engaging in virtue-signaling theatre. She then writes, "In this nihilistic vacuum, the challenge before us becomes civilizational. We can't withstand China, Russia, and Iran if we can't explain to our populations why it matters that we do. We can't fight woke ideology if we can't defend the civilization that it is determined to destroy. And we can't counter Islamism with purely secular tools. To win the hearts and minds of Muslims here in the West, we have to offer something more than videos on TikTok." So, notice this. Ayaan wrote that it would not be truthful to attribute her embrace of Christianity solely to the realization that atheism can't fortify us against our menacing foes. There's more. Atheism also can't tell us what the meaning of life is. She then says that because of this nihilism, we can't withstand China, Russia, and Iran. So, in attempting to offer a reason for adopting Christianity other than fortifying us against our foes, she has immediately circled right back around to fortifying us against our foes. That's all this is about. Is it really that untruthful to say?
Okay, so she is looking at ways to fortify us against our foes, but just looking at also, she probably did look at some of the benefits of Christianity itself. She knows the falsities of Islam, so I won't get into those. One thing is that many people who are Muslims believe that Jesus was not actually crucified. They believe that somebody may have been crucified in his place because of a kind of vague passage in the Quran with respect to that. They believe God took Jesus to heaven and they did not kill him. That's what they said. So there is a passage that's rather vague in the Quran that's historically inaccurate because, of course, we have plenty of evidence from Roman historians, from Jewish historians, Tacitus, Josephus, and others that Jesus was indeed crucified. Those are secular, actually, we have Jewish as in practicing Judaism, and a secular Roman historian also saying that, again, Jesus was given the ultimate punishment. That's the crucifixion. So we have that evidence. So that speaks to the one falsity inside the Islamic faith. Another issue in some other faiths, Hinduism is a really interesting belief system. It goes back thousands of years. It was developed over a long period of time. It springs out into many different dimensions. But the thing about Hinduism that's interesting and does correspond to some truth is that we are in a spiritual battle. Many Hindus believe that there are thousands of gods out there. And if you believe in a spiritual world of angels and demons, yes, you do believe there are thousands of gods out there. And so you look at the value, if you ask yourself whether or not there's truth to some parts of Hinduism or pantheism, this idea that everything is God, you can look at the universe as it is. Now, because the universe has a start date, it doesn't coincide with the beliefs of Hinduism, okay? The start date, which could be about 13 or 14 billion years ago, according to many estimates, it's something that we believe that time, space, and matter started then. Hindus believe that the worlds have been recycling, sort of a process of recycling, and also that we're in a process of reincarnation. Buddhists believe that as well. And so we have man-made beliefs, sometimes probably influenced by the other small g gods in the world. Of course, we do believe that. Look at Psalm 82. The Lord takes his place in the divine council. There is a mixture of gods in the world. So whether we choose to worship those gods, take a look at Joshua 24:15, or we choose to worship the one true God, that's the question. And so the nice thing about Ayaan is that she's decided to worship the one true God. She has not maybe spelled that out so clearly yet, but if she is saying why I became a Christian, we can't assume that she's merely a cultural Christian. We could assume that maybe she's done some sort of in-depth research. She did spend many years as an atheist, so she probably had much time. She's been around for a while, so she's had much time to develop her thoughts and to make clear. Now, kind of like Tom Holland, who wrote Dominion, Tom was an agnostic, but now he says he identifies as a Christian. And maybe they will be just cultural Christians. Maybe they won't go the next step and actually start to really look into the text, look into who and what Jesus is, look into the importance of the question of why. Why are we here? Why were we made? Why are humans exceptional? Why are we so distinct from the animal kingdom? Why have we been given conceptual abilities? Why do we desire purpose and meaning? Why do we seek explanations for everything in our life? Why do we conceptualize? Why do we form communities? Why do we realize that the best values in the world relate to love? Love is the ultimate. I mentioned this yesterday when I reviewed the video between Ben Shapiro and Alex on the truth, on which, religion, if it brings us truth. And unfortunately, religion itself is such a broad term. Some people might not realize this, but the United States government classifies atheism and agnosticism and secular humanism as religions under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to offer atheists and humanists and agnostics the rights in the workplace that other people in other belief systems have. They believe that if a belief system speaks to your ultimate purpose in life and your ultimate destiny, that it can be considered a religion. So which religion you choose is very important, whether you choose atheism or agnosticism, secular humanism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, each have a little nugget of truth, as I mentioned before. But only one is the truth. Only one is the way, the truth, and the life. So here we go.
Say that her conversion was solely due to this consideration. And this is what seems to have kindled such a critical reaction from some commentators. Can a conversion to Christianity really be so insensitive to the truth claims of Christianity? Is it even possible to simply adopt a theological worldview just because you prefer its ethical values in the geopolitical landscape? And this isn't something only being asked by atheists, by the way. If you believe in the truth of Christianity as a philosophical and historical fact, then what can you make of a conversion story like this one that doesn't seem to consider that a relevant factor? One atheist, Richard Dawkins, in an open letter to Hirsi Ali, had the following to say: "Dear Ayaan, as you know, you are one of my absolutely favorite people, but seriously, Ayaan, you, a Christian? You are no more a Christian than I am." Interestingly, this is something that Ayaan appears to agree with, but in the exact opposite direction. In a recent discussion, Ayaan had this to say about Dawkins.
I was called a Christian by Roger Scruton in 2008, and I said, "Roger, no, I'm not a Christian." And he said, "But you act like a Christian, and you behave like a Christian, therefore you are a Christian." And I think that's exactly what I would like to say to Richard Dawkins. It's, you act like, I've been to, choral music with him, which he enjoys very much. And he's one of the most Christian people I know.
So, quite strangely, both Richard Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi Ali seem to agree that they are about as Christian as each other. How can that possibly be the case if...
Because I think what's really nice and what's underlying much of this that you might have noticed in this whole conversation is Christian seems to be a synonym of kindness. So I think she believes that Richard Dawkins is a very kind person, maybe a just and fair, a truthful person. And that's synonymous with being a Christian. That's a good thing. People realizing the values of Christians, the values of the Christian belief system. Now, that's saying that, let me do a little caveat. Of course, I'm not saying that all Christians are perfect. I'm not saying any Christians are perfect. But I am saying that those who aspire to reflect the values of Jesus Christ work their way towards sainthood. And that should be the ultimate place that we all want to be. We all want to end up retiring from this life, in which we're just renting a space in this world to get to the next world, which is eternal and permanent. And we want to get there as saints. We want to move into the next life as a saint who truly loves love. And who is love? What is love? Well, in John, the Apostle John tells us that God is love. God is love. You won't see that in the Islamic faith. It is nowhere in the Quran. Instead, the whole idea behind the Quran is submission to power. And the ultimate power is God. But in the Quran also, God is only transcendent. In the Hindu belief system, and some Buddhists believe that God is immanent. God is within this world. If you're just within this world, you're part of a materialistic world, and therefore you could not be present if there is a prior existence before time, space, and matter. So in other words, that also helps to rule out those faiths. But the idea that God is immanent and transcendent comes from Christianity. So God is transcendent. He was outside of the universe before creating the universe, and he's immanent within the universe now. He manifested when he became flesh and dwelt among us. So he's both transcendent and immanent. And that is another reason to consider Christianity the truth. Here we go.
If they, fundamentally disagree about the truth of Christianity, well, I think that demonstrated in this is a fundamental disagreement about what religion is. Is religion a set of propositional truth claims? Or is it more like something that you act out? This particular debate has been inflamed in recent years by the influence of Jordan Peterson, who is famously difficult to pin down about his religious beliefs, but one thing he does consistently suggest is that what we believe might be better indicated by how we behave, not what we say we think is true. And there's
So, yeah, Jordan has said he lives as if he's a Christian. Now, really interesting story about Jordan's wife, Tammy. A number of years ago, not too long ago, Tammy, after Jordan had become very popular, Tammy unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a very aggressive, very scary form of cancer that she had. And a friend came to her with a rosary. Now, Tammy at this point was not a Catholic, but a friend came to her with a rosary, and they began to pray it. And Tammy realized that whenever she prayed the rosary, it made her feel peaceful. She felt at ease and at peace. And it was something that was very helpful to her. So right now, she's decided to go through the RCIA, the initiate program of Catholicism. She's going to become a Roman Catholic. And so it's curious to me whether or not Jordan will also eventually become a Roman Catholic. I would love it if he did. I would think that was extremely wonderful if Jordan came to Christianity through that door. There's many doors that you can come to as a Christian. I've gone through a few of them myself. I would have counted myself as a Catholic, a Lutheran, and a Baptist at different points in my life. So there are many doors you can take and to the truth of Jesus Christ. So here we go.
Definitely some wisdom in this. I mean, if I told you that I'm not at all superstitious, but then you saw me avoiding walking under a ladder, you might have good reason to think that I'm a little more superstitious than maybe even I would realize, or at least like to admit. If, however, like me, you grew up on a diet of new atheism, you'll probably instantly prefer the former characterization. Religion is about truth claims. Of course, religion makes truth claims. Jesus died on a cross. The Jews escaped slavery in Egypt. There exists an actual real person called God. And to say that you can be a Christian without believing these things seems ridiculous. Okay, sure, but the real issue seems to be that even if we accept the Petersonian line that religion is more about the way you behave than about any of its truth claims, Ayaan appears, at least here, to suggest that Richard Dawkins is essentially a Christian because he likes choral music to the cultural lexicon.
I actually moved back there accidentally. Let me get back to where I was.
Divisive a doctrine to probably supposed to serve as just one example amongst a host of activities that she sees Richard Dawkins partaking in and thinking that these are somehow influenced by Christianity. She appears to have been greatly influenced lately by Tom Holland, whose enormously successful Dominion has convinced a lot of people that what we call secular Western values are in fact indebted to a uniquely Christian tradition. She talks about this in her essay. But here, as it were, is the rub. There is a crucial difference between the recognition of Christian influence over our culture and many of our values and the recognition of the truth of Christianity. For example, Tom Holland.
I just want to point out Tom Holland's book. I highly recommend it. It traces everything back. He talks about the horrors of witnessing an actual crucifixion in the Arab region, which he did in recent times, which I can't even, it sounds abhorrent. I can't believe people are doing such cruel things today. But unfortunately, we can see from October 7th, yes, people do very cruel things. But Tom Holland traces everything. You guys, if you haven't read that book, definitely read it.
Holland himself was, when I last checked at least, not a Christian. And so when Ayaan writes about Western values finding their roots in the Christian tradition and that atheists have failed to understand this connection, she could be absolutely 100% correct and still not have entailed anything about the truth of Christianity. But okay.
So that's one of the things that I would just point out with this little commentary is that even if Ayaan has not looked into the truth of Christianity and she's just adopting its culture, and even if that's what Tom Holland, I think I'm more likely to think that that's what Tom Holland is doing after having read his book and watched a bunch of interviews with him. He likes to identify, he says, I identify happily as a Christian. However, he hasn't really gotten into the truth of Christianity. So Alex has a pretty good point here about, are we seeking the truth? Should we be seeking the truth? Truth matters. That's the name of my YouTube channel. So truth is very important, that we seek the truth and speak the truth and align ourselves with the truth. So thank you for coming in today. I hope you guys like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. I want to say thank you especially to Harry Stark. He's made a bunch of videos, and I have a lot of them featured in my channel, so you can go ahead and take a look at some of his videos. Jesse Camping, he's been on my channel before. Great guy. He comes from Canada. Pretty exciting stuff. Utopia Bustard 2017. So Argument from Beauty is one of the best arguments for God's existence. That's great. And then let's see, the crucifixion. Harry Stark says the crucifixion of Jesus is a historical fact, and no one can claim one made that up. That's so true. And even if you look at other people in other religions today, they don't deny that Jesus was crucified. If you look at people from the Jewish faith, they don't deny that he was crucified. People from the Hindu faith, I have friends who also believe that. Kevin, non-traditional Catholic, he also is here. And I don't know if he's still here, but Kevin is somebody I've been on. Was I on his channel or he on mine? I forget. Or maybe we were both. But he's a nice guy. He's was a traditional Catholic. He's kind of gone away from that. So I want to say thanks for showing up today, Kevin. And earlier I saw Captive Desk. So that was pretty nice to see. So I hope you guys will, let's see, atheists convince themselves that coming to Christ is the same for everyone. Hirsi Ali is on a path to the truth. Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, I look at how I came back to Christ. I was kind of floundering, weak Christian in my 30s. And I came back because of a pastor on a plane. That was one reason, but also because my experience going into a Baptist church in my area and how uplifted I felt because of the music. So I took that door to get back in. And then I started really investigating my faith and looking into the history and looking into other things. And I now am in the Catholic faith. So I encourage you, just whichever door you're taking, take a door, at least open the door. Jesus is outside the door knocking, knock, knock, knock. So ask, seek, find. He promises if you seek him, he will make himself known to you. He promises that. It says that in the Bible. He will make himself known if you sincerely seek him. Now, I saw an atheist one time. I'll just mention this really quickly. Saw an atheist one time, and he filmed himself riding around on his golf cart in Ohio. And he was saying stuff like, okay, God, here I am, make yourself known. He's doing all this stuff on his golf cart. He's laughing. I think he's probably had a beer in front of him. I'm like, come on, really? That's your main? I mean, that is not a sincere seeker. That is somebody who's joking around. And so you're not going to find God riding around on your golf cart, making a YouTube video of yourself, and you're trying to tell the world, hey, God, make yourself known. No, if you really want to find God, get on your hands, get on your knees, I should say, and pray. Pray could be an acronym from, I've heard this before, praise, repent, ask, and yield. Pray to God. Read the Bible. Take a look at the Gospels. Start off with the Gospels and see what you think about it. As you read it, do you feel like this could be a meaning of truth? Think about it. One way to come back to Jesus is just to look at the stories of the four stories told by all four authors of the way that the empty tomb was found by women. So in a culture which totally denied the value of the testimony of women, in all 4 Gospels, it says that Mary Magdalene was the first to discover Jesus, the first to see Jesus at the empty tomb. And that was followed, of course, by his appearances to his other disciples, many of whom were not even at the foot of the cross. I mean, how embarrassing that his rock upon whom he was going to build his church, Peter, wasn't at the foot of the cross. Mother Mary was. Mary Magdalene was. The other Mary, she was there too. And then you also have the Apostle John. Behold, your mother, Jesus said to the Apostle John. Behold, your son. He knew he wouldn't be able to physically in this life take care of her because he was going to resurrect to his throne. But he had entrusted John, the apostle, to take care of her. So that was a pretty good thing. Yeah, so Utopia Buster says, seek and you will find. Ask and you will receive. That is very, very true. And I know that the people who are here in this chat right now all are amazing Christians. And if any of you guys want to come on my channel at some point in the future and talk about your beliefs, I'd love to have you. I think it adds a lot of value when we have conversations and dialogues rather than my monologue. So I think that would be fantastic. So feel free to let me know, shoot me an email, any of that kind of thing. So thank you guys. Just again, have a wonderful day and God bless you. Bye-bye.